Do you have a coworker who's just a little bit too awkward in the office? Maybe they're socially awkward, or say the wrong thing at the wrong time, or there's just something off about them and you can't quite put your finger on it? Well, they might actually be autistic. In this video, I will share 7 signs that will help you spot autism in adults in the workplace, in an office environment, and why that is very important for you and for them to do that. Plus, I'll be sharing one bonus sign at the end that's a bit uncomfortable for people to talk about and to admit, but surprisingly, this is connected to autism. The first sign that your coworker might be autistic is that they're socially awkward. Adults with autism may struggle to understand body language, facial expression, and tone of voice. So what this might look like at an office party or by the water cooler or in the kitchen corner in the office is that somebody who might be on the autism spectrum, somebody you work with, but they don't know it yet, and obviously you don't know, they'd rock up to another group of people talking and they'd be like, hey, so what are we talking about today? And the biggest telltale sign is that they fail to recognize the signs other people in that group, like the raised eyebrows, or the turning away of the body, or like, that awkward look that the coworker, the other group of people might be giving to that person. The fact that they're failing to recognize these cues, these social cues, is what makes them even more socially awkward. Another way this manifests is that they misunderstand friendliness from a coworker. And this is made especially worse when that coworker is the opposite sex. So they would take somebody who's being friendly to them and might read it in a completely wrong way, like as if it's a romantic sign or gesture. Even if they don't do that, it might appear that way to the other people in the office, and the others might be like, oh, that person's like latching on to her or him a bit too much, and it makes the other people around them uncomfortable. Before you get alarmed about this, you have to recognize the intention behind it. It could be that the person who's on the autism spectrum, but they don't know, they're getting these signals of friendliness and they're considering that person as a safe person. So they want to spend more time, or they attach themselves to that other person for security, to be like a social buddy or social guide, like a tour guide, so they can help that autistic person navigate awkward social cues and so on. So just step back for a second. Don't get freaked out that this is unwanted romantic, entanglement, but just look at the intention behind what's going on. And if this is really making you uncomfortable, try to just straight up ask that person, oh, do you like that person? Or what's going on? Are you guys just really good friends? Or whatever. This will help you to stop imagining that there's an unwanted, friendly, or romantic approach going on from the autistic person towards another coworker of the opposite sex, or sometimes the same sex. Another way socially awkwardness manifests in autistic people in the workplace is that they have challenges making friendships in the office. Again, this is because they have a hard time understanding social norms. For example, at a social event, the autistic person might latch themselves on to one other coworker just because they're using that other person to kind of co-regulate their anxiety or their difficulties because they feel safe with that other person. Or they might be trying so hard to make friends that they might get labeled thirsty or a tryhard. By the way, my name is Ritu and I'm autistic, and I only found this out at the age of 39. I have a 75-year-old dad who is on the autism spectrum, and my son is also autistic and he's only 5. My dad has been fired in the past because of his autism, because of his sleep problems connected to autism, and many other things. And I believe that I have also been fired because of how my autism, undiagnosed, had presented in the workplace. So this topic is very important to my heart. Another reason why this is so important is because unknowingly, I have contributed to other coworkers getting fired without realizing that they might be neurodivergent. So I contributed to maybe HR complaints or investigations or whatever. There's like social pressure in the office where somebody who might have been a bit awkward because of their neurodivergence, but we didn't know that. So we were were like, no, this person's inappropriate or blah, blah, blah. And that ended up in that person losing their job. This sits so heavy on my heart because now I realize that they're just autistic, just like me. And if I had only known, I would have understand what is driving those behaviors that makes them appear awkward or inappropriate, and I wouldn't have taken them personally or out of context. More people need to be aware of neurodivergence, especially in the office, so that we misunderstand each other a little bit less, so that we have compassion and we have understanding for each other, and we give each other grace even when another person doesn't fit social norms that we expect them to have. Carrying on with the list now. The second sign that somebody you work with might be autistic but they don't know yet is communication challenges. This can manifest in a couple of ways, especially like saying things completely out of context. I'll give you a real example that I experienced in one of my past jobs. I had a coworker who I really didn't know is ADHD and autistic. None of us knew. He didn't disclose, even though I think he should have, because so many of us in that office were neurodivergent, but of course, a lot of us didn't know, and we didn't have understanding or tolerance about that at the time. So we were in a meeting and we had experts from another company visiting, and we were discussing a marketing strategy. And he just started to like word vomit out all these things he knew about that specific strategy, but that had absolutely nothing to do with the topic of the meeting. So now looking back, I realized he was info dumping, and he was a bit nervous that he's being evaluated here about his expertise. So he was just like oversharing like crazy about all the things he knows about that marketing in general area without having it be anything to do with the topic of that meeting itself. So it was just so out of context. All of us were like, what is he talking about right now? And to us, it made him appear even more incompetent, like he didn't really know what he was talking about. But in reality, he knew a bit too much. He just was sharing out of context. Another telltale sign that your coworker is autistic is literal interpretation. So they take what you say word for word. They don't understand idioms or sarcasm. I'll give you another example from my life. Once a coworker, we were on our lunch break and she was like, why is it raining? And why is there hail? It was hailing. So she was asking that. And I was like, oh, that's because when the rain is falling, but the wind is so strong, each raindrop gets pushed up above the clouds where it's really cold, and that raindrop freezes and it falls down as hail. And the coworker was like, she was trying so hard not to laugh straight at my face because I clearly just misunderstood. It was an expression she was making. Why is it hailing now? Whereas I went into this whole scientific explanation of why it hails. So yeah. Another sign of autism in a coworker is monotone speech. So a coworker who you might not know is autistic might have this like robot voice or kind of this like really straight way of speaking. And on the flip side, they might have a really sing-song way of speaking, like this, yeah, it's like that, and yeah. So they have this like weird intonation that they might do, and this makes it really hard for you to read their emotions. They might also have this blank stare. They might have eyes that are kind of like really open and seem to always be dilated, and they're always looking at you, these big eyes that make you feel uncomfortable, but that's just how they are. That's how their neurodivergence expresses. It has nothing to do with you. Don't take it personally. Yes, it makes that person appear a bit awkward or makes you feel weird being near them, but this is why they are like that. It's not about you. It's about them and their neurodivergence. Another big sign, which I mentioned just before, is info dumping. When the person who's on the spectrum doesn't realize that the other people are just not listening or not interested in the topic that they're talking about. They go on and on and on and on and on and on and on about their special interests or the thing that they know about. Often in the office, this is connected to their one specialization in work professionally. And it can come off like they're trying to be a know-it-all. They're trying to like tell you what you should do, or they're trying to be like, oh, I know better. Yes, in a way, they are doing that, but that's not the intention driving it here. They just want the truth to be known. They want not just the little little truth. They want the whole truth to be known. So that's why they're info dumping everything they know about that specific topic in that professional sphere. Sign number 3 that somebody you work with is on the autism spectrum is routines. They're super attached to their routines. And the biggest telltale sign is that they become distressed, they become agitated or nervous or unable to function if there's a disruption in their routine. How this shows up is that if there's any change in the office, whether you move offices or the person on the spectrum has to move desks or floors in the office, they just get so discombobulated, they get so disoriented, they get grumpy or negative or complaining. They absolutely can't deal with this small or big change. It disrupts their own work. They might start coming to work late or not coming in at all. They might call in sick, or their productivity just like nosedives, and they just become this like sour person to be with in meetings and so on. So what you're looking for here is how they're reacting to change. If they're having an exceptionally hard time, if they're becoming super negative or grumpy or insisting that things don't change, then this is a sign that they have a really hard time with change because they're on the autism spectrum. Another way that people on the spectrum can react when there's a new teammate joining is that they can become very negative and insecure. So they actually shut down against that new person, and they do everything that they can to kind of sabotage that new person socially entering the team. Sign number 4 that your coworker is on the autism spectrum, but they don't know, but now you might know because you know all these signs, is repetitive movements. This includes hand flapping, hair twirling, pen flipping, restless leg syndrome when the leg is constantly like this, or rocking back and forth on their chair, or swinging the chair, swivel chairs going back and forth, around and around all the time. This is called stimming, when they're stimulating themselves to regulate their nervous system. Unfortunately, many of these can be disruptive to other team members. So yeah, sometimes they get flagged. Sometimes a person on the spectrum is trying their best to suppress these urges. But when they do slip out, this is why that's happening. Sign number 5 that your coworker is on the autism spectrum, they may not have told you, or they may themselves not yet know, is sensory difficulties or sensory sensitivities. They may be easily overwhelmed by strong sensory input. That means, does your coworker kind of startles really easily if there's a loud noise, or sometimes if there's a strong light, or sometimes if there's really bad smell, or again a really loud noise, they go into such a shock that it appears like they're hyperventilating. They can't breathe, their eyes become big, and they start to repeat to themselves, oh my God. And it appears like they're completely overreacting. And for people nearby, this is uncomfortable because you want to go and help them, soothe them, but you can't. And they're not overreacting here. Yes, they are overreacting. That's what it looks like they are, but they can't help it. This is their nervous system that gets extremely overwhelmed when there's such a strong sensory input. They may be sensitive to textures, so anything that they have to physically touch, or that physically touches them, like their desk and their office chair. They may bring in blankets or like a soft fleece to put on their chair. They may bring in leg rests. They may bring in like wrist rests for their keyboard and like totally customize their desk space in order to try and make their sensory environment more comfortable for them. The number 6 sign that your coworker might be autistic is emotional dysregulation, aka meltdowns and public confrontations. For somebody on the spectrum, whether that's ADHD or autism, it might be really, really hard for them to manage their emotions. That can lead to emotional outbursts in the office in a really awkward and inappropriate way. I'll give you another example of something embarrassing I did in a meeting. I had a problem with another coworker. She was female, and in a meeting of like 12 people, I just looked at her across the desk and I was like, what's your problem? Do you have a problem with me? What is it? Why don't you just say it out in the open? So this is like really unprofessional, but it's me having a hard time with my emotional regulation. Another example with a coworker, she was a bit jealous or upset that I had accomplished something without really trying, a little bit ahead of schedule than she was aiming for. So in a Slack chat between me, her, my boss, and another coworker, she just openly blurted out and like accused me. She's like, Ritu, can't believe you stole that work from me or whatever. Like they were so worked up that they couldn't control themselves anymore and just said it. Now I later realized that she is ADHD, which she had told the bosses but not the rest of us. I wish she had, because it would have cleared a lot of misunderstandings we had and misconceptions we had about her. And she's also autistic just like me. If I had known that we have that in common, I feel like instead of being against her, I would have been a bit more together with her. Sign number 7 that your coworker might be autistic is burnout, specifically autistic burnout. Autistic burnout is a bit more intense than regular burnout in the way that the person just can't function. And they might be experiencing this burnout for several months, sometimes even years. So some days when the burnout is specifically bad, they just can't function. Like brushing their teeth becomes a really difficult thing and they just can't do it. And in those days, they might be calling in sick. They might be doing a lot more home office. They might have funny hours. So like starting work at 10 o'clock or whatever. So these are not signs of laziness or avoiding work. These are signs of autistic burnout. This channel is for neurodivergent parents who want to be great parents despite being on the spectrum, ADHD and or autism. And the reason why I'm sharing these things is because one day our kids are going to enter the workforce. One day our kids are going to be in office environments or in workplace situations. Maybe they already are. Maybe some of us already have adult children who are already working. And I want to encourage us to be open. I want to encourage us as parents to allow our kids to be open about their neurodivergence. Fight for them that they can advocate. They can tell their entire team that, look, I'm neurodivergent. So if I'm behaving certain ways, please don't misunderstand me. There's a reason why I tend to do some things differently than all of you. If the other teammates know this about our kids or about us, then the misunderstandings are just so much less. There's less accusation, there's less misunderstanding of their intentions, there's less complaints to the HR, and so on. Finally, the bonus sign that nobody really talks about, but it is connected to autism, is digestive issues. So digestive issues showing up like weird eating habits, untimely eating, eating at their desks, snacking all the time, or sudden or disruptive toilet breaks. Autism often causes physiological changes in the body and often causes gut issues. You can just do a quick search on YouTube, autism and digestion problems, and you'll see what I'm talking about. I know people who are directly affected by this in my social circle who are autistic or have autistic kids. So let's not be like, ew, that's gross, ew, you have digestion problems and you're autistic. Let's try and have an open mind about that and just understand that these are just differences in people's brains and bodies. These are the signs that are the most common and the ones that I have personally witnessed in my life and in the life of other autistic coworkers. Of course, it's not all inclusive, and of course, being on the spectrum does not excuse somebody from really inappropriate or abusive behavior. So keep that in mind. This is not like a green light for anybody to do anything that their crazy mind thinks up of. Now, I want to hear from you. Did you ever have a coworker that you're kind of like had a hunch that there's something weird about them, there's something different about them, but you couldn't really put your finger on it? What is it that you noticed about them that made you think that they're autistic? I'd love to know, so put that in the comment. And what about your parents? Did you ever think that my parents are just so weird, I just don't get them? Maybe they are undiagnosed autistic. If you want to know and maybe learn how they might be, check out this video right here.